Class that I record. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the Kennedy and Johnson years is what we're going to be talking about today. The Kennedy and Johnson years. And we're continuing Unit 10, the Cold War, and the Civil Rights Movement. You guys ready? Good to go? I'm sure you guys can figure this out on your own. Alrighty. So, election in 1960. The Democrats nominate John F. Kennedy, also known as JFK. And they also nominate Lyndon B. Johnson, LBJ, as the vice president. We'll talk about those two today. Now, Nixon is nominated by the Republicans, Richard Milhouse Nixon. Why would Nixon be the natural candidate for the presidency? Because he was vice president under who? Eisenhower. He was vice president under Eisenhower. We'll also nominate Spiro Agnew, vice president under the Republican Party as well. So just know the ticket. Good so far? Probably not. You guys are still writing. While you guys are writing, I have a knock-knock joke. But you have to laugh. Okay, ready? Knock-knock. I eat mop. You eat your poo, that's disgusting. Get it? I eat mop. I eat mop poo. I heard that yesterday and I just laughed hysterically. Anyway. This Kennedy campaigned on this idea of new frontier. When Kennedy campaigned, he campaigned on the idea of a new frontier. He said, "We stand today on the edge of a new frontier. The frontier of the 1960s, a frontier of unknown opportunities and paths, a frontier of unfulfilled hopes and threats. The new frontier I speak of is not a set of promises. It is a set of challenges." Now, what is a frontier? Who can tell me what a frontier roughly is? When we talk about the frontier in the colonial era, Manifest Destiny, frontier, I mean, what is a frontier? Come on, folks. Yeah, right. Unsettled land, undiscovered, untouched, unexplored. So, I mean, the literal frontier that we have yet to discover is what in the 1960s? What do we have yet to explore? Space. We have yet to explore space. Kennedy's going to be like, yeah, we should totally explore space. But he's implying, no, it's not just the literal frontier. It's the unexplored frontier of our potential. Oh, think about that. Isn't that brilliant? The unexplored potential of young Americans. That's the new frontier he's talking about. That he's going to explore the unexplored or the undiscovered potential of young Americans. You are the new frontier. You have to discover what you're capable of. And when you discover that potential, who will benefit from that potential? The people, America, we as a country will grow. So again, the new frontier was not just space, but rather young Americans. Remember the baby boom, all those people born? There's a lot of you now. You guys must join the effort, and you must join up in order to make sure that America gets better. We discover that new potential. So new frontier. And so when a lot of young voters buy into this, okay, I like that. It's a pretty cool idea. Well, another issue during the campaign that was that Kennedy was a Catholic. Now, why might this make a lot of Americans hesitant? Why might they not like the idea of a Kennedy being Catholic? So who can tell me why? Raise your hand. Marisol. Oh my gosh, the Pope might influence the president. Do we want a man on planet Earth telling the president what to do? And might this be a potential under a Catholic president? And have we seen this before? Remember Alfred Landon in the 1920 election? Oh, no Catholics because they're bad. You can have that going on. So Kennedy is a Catholic candidate, and so will that make a lot of Protestants and nativists unhappy? Yeah, you have this going on for years now. So another cool thing about this election, though, folks, it's the first televised debates.
That completes the opening statements.
So let's go watch these televised debates real quick. And you'll notice a difference. I want you guys to watch Kennedy and Nixon debating here. And when you guys are watching, I want you to notice in your assessment who you think was better.
And now the candidates will answer questions or comment upon one another's answers to questions put by correspondents in the networks. The correspondents. I'm Sandra Van Oker, NBC News.
This is the weirdest part, in my opinion.
I'm Charles Warren, Mutual News. Stuart Ovens, CBS News. Bob Fleming, ABC News.
Just awkward.
The first question to Senator Kennedy from Mr. Fleming. Senator, the Vice President in his campaign has said that you are naive and at times immature. He has raised the question of leadership. On this issue, why do you think people should vote for you rather than the Vice President?
Well, the Vice President and I came to the Congress together, 1946, both served in the Labor Committee. I've been there now for 14 years, the same period of time as he has. So that our experience in government is comparable. Secondly, I think the question is, what are the programs that we advocate? What is the party record that we lead? I come out of the Democratic Party, which in this century has produced Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman, and which supported and sustained these programs which I've discussed tonight. Mr. Nixon comes out of the Republican Party. He was nominated by it. And it is a fact that through most of these last 25 years, the Republican leadership has opposed federal aid for education, medical care for the aged, development of the Tennessee Valley, development of our natural resources. I think Mr. Nixon is an effective leader of his party.
Now watch Nixon real quick. I mean, if you're watching this on television for the first time, if you're new to TV, would you know how to act? Not really. So Nixon is the first time on for both of these guys. And so you're going to watch them. You're going to wonder, well, who looks more comfortable?
I hope he would grant me the same. The question before us is, which point of view and which party do we want to lead the United States?
Mr. Nixon, would you like to comment on this, say something?
I have no comment.
The next question to Vice President Nixon from Mr. Van Oken. Mr. Vice President, since the question of executive leadership is a very important campaign issue, I'd like to follow Mr. Nolan's question. Now, Republican campaign slogans, you see them on signs around the country, as you did last week, say, it's experience that counts. That's over a picture of yourself, sir. Implying that you have more governmental executive decision.
Now watch this real quick. Remember, you're watching this for the first time. Watch what Nixon does.
Making experience.
What was that? No, he was sweating. So if you're watching this presidential candidate and the candidate sweats, what do you assume is happening? He's nervous. Does that make you look weak or strong? Weak.
Your opponent. Now, in his news conference on August 24th, President Eisenhower was asked to give one example of a major idea of yours that he adopted. His reply was, and I'm quoting, "If you give me a week, I might think of one. I don't remember." Now, that was a month ago, sir, and the President hasn't brought it up since. And I'm wondering, sir, if you can clarify which version is correct, the one put out by Republican campaign leaders or the one put out by President Eisenhower?
Well, I would suggest, Mr. Van Oker, that if you know the President, that was probably a facetious remark. I would also suggest that insofar as his statement is concerned, that I think it would be improper for the President of the United States to disclose the instances in which members of his official family had made recommendations, as I have made them through the years, to him which he has accepted or rejected. The President has always maintained, and very properly so, that he is entitled to get what advice he wants from his cabinet and from his other advisors without disclosing that to anybody, including, as a matter of fact, to Congress. Now, I can only say this. Through the years, I have sat in the National Security Council. I have been in the cabinet. I have met with the legislative leaders. I have met with the President when he made the great decisions with regard to Lebanon, Timor-Matsu, other matters. The President has asked for my advice. I have given it. Sometimes my advice has been taken. Sometimes it is not. I do not say that I have made the decision. And I would say that no President should ever allow anybody else to make the major decisions.
So, if you had to compare Kennedy and Nixon's response, and you're watching this on television, who do you think won this debate? Kennedy. When people watch this debate on television, they saw Kennedy, thought, that guy looks good. He put on makeup. You could tell that he looked healthy on television. Nixon refused to put on makeup. He said, no, I'm going to look natural on television. I'm not going to put on makeup for the American people. They know who I am. But the problem is Nixon looked pale. He blended in with the background of it. His features didn't stand out. He looked sick. And then he sweats, he's nervous. He looks all aloof because he's looking back and forth. I mean, if you watch this debate on television, Kennedy won. But here's the interesting thing. If you heard this debate on the radio, people believed that Nixon won. And so the importance of this debate is that it shows the significance of television on campaigns. All of a sudden, do you have to be a 24-hour TV president? You have to look on television. Look good on television, guys. If we were debating on the radio, I'd be like, well, I really think that the American people should do much better and not be drinking and whatever else. But because on television, am I allowed to have that kind of posture? Am I saying look at the camera and nod and look, confident, have my shoulders squared and whatever else? Well, Nixon doesn't look at me. The entire time, Nixon's shoulders are slanted a bit. Well, if I'm watching this, and these stupid body language experts today, like, Nixon looks weak. He's not putting enough weight on his right leg, which shows that he's relying too much on his left. What that means. But ultimately, the argument here is that TV played a huge role in the Kennedy-Nixon election because Nixon looked weak. And you have to understand, is a TV audience large? And so everyone is watching television on their 6-inch screens wondering, what did Nixon just do? Did he just get nervous on television? So this will really change the landscape of the election. In any case, here you see them on television. And again, this is kind of the defining moment of the election on television. And as a result, Kennedy will win the election 303 to 219. But this is, folks, the closest election in U.S. history. Kennedy only wins by 120,000 votes. That's 0.1% difference. It's the closest election in U.S. history. Now, here's the fun fact. La Puente is only 40,000 people. So imagine La Puente, Baldwin Park, and West Covina would be enough to change the presidential election. That's how close this election was. It's the closest election in history because, again, they were pretty similar for the most part, but there was enough to get Kennedy the win because of that television campaign. Everyone cool with that? Fun stuff. And again, as you can see, California's climbing up in the ranks of electoral votes, but New York is still much larger. Not yet, guys. Not yet. Anyway, Kennedy becomes the 35th president of the United States, and he gives the very famous inaugural address where he talks to the American people, and he says, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Because up until this point, has a lot of the programs of our presidents been kind of giving back to the people and helping the people and economic welfare? Sure, we've done a lot of New Deal-esque type programs. Well, what he's asking is, stop relying so much on government. Ask yourself, what can you do for America? Remember that new frontier that we have to explore? Discover that and then find out, I can be an engineer when I grow up. I can be a constructor, and then use that and do something for your country. Don't say, government, why don't you pay for me to go to college? Government, why am I paid so low? No, don't be paid low and blame the government. Why not you go out and explore your potential? And again, if provided institutional and historical racism pushes you down, then we'll take care of that. But for the most part, the argument is that you are the forefront of this new frontier. Now, he is the only Catholic president ever in history, and we elect him anyway because he said, look, I know I'm Catholic, but I will not let the Pope influence my presidency. They're like, okay, that's good enough. We get that. And he was 43 when he was elected. Therefore, does that make him the youngest president of the United States? No. You see, you thought. Everyone was like, Kennedy was so young. Must have been the youngest president. Does anyone know who the actual youngest president was? Anyone? In the back? Anyone? No. TR. Teddy Roosevelt was 42 and 10 months. Kennedy is the second youngest at 43 and 7 months. Who was third? Clinton at 46. Grant at 46. And you know who's fifth? Obama. Your 5 youngest presidents, guys, 47 to 42. How old do you have to be president, guys? What's the age to be president? What's the minimum age to be president of the United States? Do you guys know? It is actually 35. So I'm like 7 years away, guys. I'm just right there. So close. Anyway, Kennedy gets elected, and his domestic policy becomes known as New Frontier. Ideally, things would get better because, he says, oh, the American people are going to like me, whatever else. But in truth, was this election close? It was a very tight election, which means Kennedy will not get all the programs that he wanted. In fact, most of Kennedy's New Frontier programs will fail. I mean, look at Barack Obama's election, right? Is he getting a lot of his programs passed? Why not? Because there's a Republican Congress that opposes him. The same is true of Kennedy. But he did pass a few programs that were New Deal programs. Because have we had Republicans and Democrats support New Deal programs on both sides already? Eisenhower supported New Deal, Truman supported New Deal, and so he did a few things. One, he increased minimum wage from $1 to, wait for it, $1.25. That's a lot though, guys. I mean, that's good money. My dad was getting paid, I think, $3 an hour when he was working here in the 1960s. So, I mean, this is pretty decent. $3, $1.25. Hey, that's the national average. I think California was already $3 by this time. Places like maybe, I don't know, West Virginia would still have a lower minimum wage rate. And the Housing Act. The Housing Act did a few things. It built up mass transit. So again, things like what? What is mass transit? You guys know what mass transit is? It's like public transportation. So trains, Amtrak, subways, trolleys, that kind of thing. Way back when we thought that we were going to update California's subway and rail systems, we decided, no, California's a car country. And now we're like, well, maybe not so much anymore. Also, low-income public housing. So again, we're always going to provide housing for the low-income families. And of course, home loans, because we want to make sure that people can afford their homes. Now, in this cartoon, it suggests that this is a criticism of Kennedy's New Frontier. The argument being that, of course, we're going to have this new frontier, we're going to have this new frontier, and people are going to get busy, and people are going to have to pay for all of this, but ultimately, who's going to have to pay for all these new programs that are supposed to help the lower classes? Who's going to have to pull this wagon forward? The taxpayers. Whoops. So the argument is, sure, Kennedy, you want to do all these things, but is it really going to be the taxpayers' responsibility? I mean, that's not ideal. And so a lot of conservative congressmen said, we're not going to do that. That's just not good for us. So Kennedy's domestic policies ultimately don't pan out. He does have something called the steel price showdown, though, which is one of his major successes as president. You guys remember pools, like railroad pools and trusts? The steel companies were doing the same thing. What is a pool? Who can remind me what a pool is? What is a pool from the 1960s, Unit 6, or 1860s and 70s? No one remembers what a pool is? You guys are making me sad. Marisol? Exactly. A pool is when several companies come together and they jack up the price. Remember that? Pools? Railroads did it all the time. Well, the steel companies were doing that, saying, ha ha ha, what's America going to do about it? They need steel to build up America. Well, Kennedy said, no, don't do that because look what you're doing to prices. So Kennedy forced the steel industry to lower their prices. This guy is the owner of Bethlehem Steel, and that's his dog. Fun fact, the dog was made out of steel. It's not true. But yeah, again, Kennedy forced Kennedy forced the steel industry to lower their prices because they were inflating it. Well, one of Kennedy's biggest successes is the space race. The space race. Kennedy decides to join the space race because is America already behind?
Yeah.
They are already behind. Sydney, what did the Russians send up to space in 1957? Sputnik. And we're scared out of our minds. They beat us. We got there in 1958 with Explorer 1, but are we still behind? So we said, look, you know what? I know that we need to beat the Russians. They beat us to space, but you know what they're not going to beat us to? The moon. They're not going to beat us to the moon. So Kennedy said, that's our new program. By the end of the decade, Kennedy said, by the end of the decade, it's 1960, by the end of the decade, an American, will be on the moon. And so Kennedy spends over $24 billion on this project, $24 billion on this project. And he was criticized for it. Why would people criticize? If I told you guys we're going to spend $300 billion to go to Mars, what might a modern criticism be if I told you in this current economy that I was spending $300 billion to go to Mars? What might you argue? Yeah, Cordell? Yeah, why don't we give that $24 billion to the people? I'm sure the schools could have used that. Mr. King needs a new computer. I mean, why can't we invest in more schools? Why can't we invest in more Social Security? Invest in, I don't know, defense. The moon, you say? And Kennedy responded to those critics and said, why the moon? Why the moon? Let me ask you, why did we climb the highest mountains? Why did we cross the Atlantic 35 years ago? Why did Charles Lindbergh fly across, the Atlantic on his own? It's because we're human. You know, we explore, we search, we find knowledge. That's what we do. And he dropped the mic and he walked away. He's like, what? And then the American people are like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And so, by 1969, folks, mankind successfully gets on the moon. Let's watch a quick clip of that. Yes, sir.
How much was it that he spent?
$24 billion. Not to get confused with the theoretical $300 billion I told you recently. That's the supposed. It's actually $24 billion. All right, here's the moon. I took that picture.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
Good morning. Man is about to launch himself on a trip to the moon from this Florida launch complex. Astronauts Armstrong, Collins, and Aldrin sitting there atop the great Saturn rocket in their command module. My palms are sweaty.
That's, do you know, remember the mission launch day? 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. What a moment. I am on my way to the moon. It seemed that the whole world stopped. This man set out on the adventure to escape from his own planet and to set foot on a distant one. Hello there, everybody. Hello there. Well, Houston, if that's not the Earth, we're in trouble. The lunar module cutting itself free from the command module, beginning the maneuvers which should place it on the surface of the moon. Roger, you don't run that. Roger, I said, look, they don't want to leave. Houston, you're built for landing, over. Roger, 3 feet, 2.5 down. We're cruising to the right level. 30 seconds. Oh, jeez. And quality base here. Is she going to land it? Oh. I am on the moon. We're going to be busy for a minute. There it is. There's a foot coming down the step. At the foot of the ladder. Armstrong is on the moon. Neil Armstrong, 38-year-old American, standing on the surface of the moon. On this July 20th, 1969. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Well, for thousands of years now, it's been man's dream to walk on the moon. Right now, after seeing it happen, knowing that it happened, it still seems like a dream. Go ahead, Mr. President. This is Houston House. Well, Neil and Buzz, this certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made from the White House. Thank you, Mr. President. Honor for us to be able to participate here today. We think that you've done a magnificent job up there today, Hilbert. Thank you very much. Have a long day. I am taking his first steps there. I wonder just what there is to add to that.
Pretty awesome. So again, in 1969, Apollo 11 successfully lands on the moon. The 2 men that walk on the moon are Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. And even today, folks, that's a fairly impressive feat. Because today, do you guys know how many people have actually walked on the moon since? Or in total, how many people have actually been on the moon? In the totality of all of mankind, how many people have actually been on the moon? Does anyone know? 12. In all of mankind, only 12 people have walked on the moon. Of those 12, all were American. So that's a pretty awesome thing to say. And the suggestion is that, again, only 12 people in our history have walked on that moon. So even today, I'm like, holy crap, that's impressive. I would love to walk on the moon one day. That's pretty cool. Yeah. All men. All men. It's not to suggest that women weren't allowed to go. It's just that for those times, I mean, women, we eventually will have female astronauts, but none have yet to walk on the moon. In any case, This is a pretty big feat for us. Now, one of the secret histories, like we've talked about previously, is what if Apollo 11 failed? What if we land on the moon and then we realize, how do we get these people back? And what if, let's say, the shuttle launcher fails? What if the escape pod can't get them off the moon? What do we do? We had to be prepared for this. So Nixon, he writes that secret speech that we always do in these off-chance situations. About 7 years ago, the Nixon Library released the speech in the event that the Apollo 11 mission failed. Now, I read this speech every year, and every time I read it, I still get chills from it. I get kind of emotional, because you have to understand, guys, these men knew they were risking their lives, but if they failed, it would be a huge thing. And I think it's just a beautiful speech. So I'm going to read that to you guys real quick here. It reads, "Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace. These brave men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, know that there is no hope for their recovery. But they also know that there is hope for mankind in their sacrifice. These two men are laying down their lives in mankind's most notable goal, the search for truth and understanding. They will be mourned by their families and friends. They will be mourned by their nation. They will be mourned by the people of the world. They will be mourned by a Mother Earth that dared send 2 of their sons into the unknown. In their exploration, they stirred the people of the world to feel as one. In their sacrifice, they bind more tightly the brotherhood of man. In ancient days, men looked at stars and saw their heroes in the constellations. In modern days, we do much the same, but our heroes are men of epic flesh and blood. Others will follow and surely find their way home. Man's search will not be denied, but these men were the first, and they will remain the foremost in our hearts. For every human being who looks up at the moon in the nights to come will know that there is some corner of another world that is forever mankind." So you see this and you realize, wow, that's a pretty powerful statement. Again, if the Apollo 11 mission did fail, it would have been a very different world. So it is something to keep in mind, guys. But that's the Apollo 11 mission. Anyways, talk about civil rights under Kennedy then. So what did Kennedy do for civil rights along the way? Well, when we talked about Truman and Eisenhower, who was a much more active civil rights president, Truman or Eisenhower? Truman was a much more active civil rights president. Which president had more things happen, though? Eisenhower, but he wasn't very active. Kennedy will have a lot of things happen, and he'll be active. He was, in fact, that's the wrong place, civil rights president. So, the first thing you guys should note is that in 1960, in the Boynton v. Virginia case, the Supreme Court ruled that interstate buses must be desegregated. In the Supreme Court case of Boynton v. Virginia, Supreme Court ruled that interstate buses must be desegregated. Now, who may not follow this desegregation law? The South is likely not to follow this policy, right? They may be like, no, hey, we're not going to do that. The North can't tell us what to do. Them Yankees aren't going to tell us how to live our lives. State rights issue for many of them. So in Boynton v. Virginia, they ruled that interstate buses must be desegregated. Well, to ensure that these buses were desegregated, you had the beginning of freedom rides. You had the beginning of what are known as freedom rides. And the freedom rides were organized by a group called CORE, or the Congress on Racial Equality. CORE, Congress on Racial Equality. CORE. Now, CORE, Congress on Racial Equality. What they would do, these freedom riders, is what? What would they do? What would they do, folks? I mean, it's in the name. What would these people do? Look at the map. What would they do? They would ride the bus. To make sure what? To make sure that they were desegregated. And so what the Freedom Riders did is they rode the bus from D.C. to Jackson, Mississippi to ensure bus desegregation. So they would sit in the front, the back, wherever, just to make sure these buses remained desegregated once they got where? to the south. So again, they might start in D.C. and be desegregated at first, but once they got to the south, might the southern states try to segregate the buses again? Sure. Well, that is what happened. They did try to segregate the buses in the south, and the Freedom Riders were attacked. In fact, many of them were bombed. Many of them were attacked, beaten, pulled off their buses. Local sheriffs would attack them, shoot at the buses. They bombed out buses. Many of these Freedom Riders were beaten, hospitalized. Now, are these Southerners following the law? The Supreme Court just ruled you cannot segregate buses. So in response, Robert F. Kennedy, Attorney General, younger brother of John F. Kennedy, he sent 400 U.S. Marshals to protect the Freedom Riders. So Robert F. Kennedy, the Attorney General, sent 400 U.S. Marshals to protect the Freedom Riders. Now, why might I, a racist KKK figure in the South, not be able to attack this bus anymore? Why would I be afraid to attack the bus now that there's U.S. Marshals on the bus? Yeah, they might shoot back. Or if you kill a U.S. Marshal, who would respond? The U.S. government would respond with the Army. And so the U.S. Marshals were sent in, the 400 U.S. Marshals were sent to protect the Freedom Riders. And as a result, the buses were eventually desegregated. Success for civil rights? Yay! Is Kennedy a much more civil rights-y president than Eisenhower? Most definitely. Fun fact, RFK is my favorite historical figure. Yep, just so you know. Anyway, there's that. People also wonder, is RFK, do they have like the same name? No, RFK, JFK? No, it's John Fitzgerald Kennedy and Francis Kennedy, Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy. So, RFK and JFK. So similar, it's like me and my brothers. We're AJK, BJK, and CJK. So, I guess hypothetically would be close. Anyway, another key thing is James Meredith and University of Mississippi. So here, James Meredith wanted to attend Ole Miss. Ole Miss, by the way, is the same university in the movie The Blind Side. Sandra Bullock, in case you're curious. Now, University of Mississippi, are they going to accept James Meredith? Would they in the South at this time? No, because why not? Because he's black. We're not going to take him. He's black. But can they do that? No. Kennedy ruled, or rather the Supreme Court ruled, you cannot segregate public schools. And the University of Mississippi is a public state school. So Kennedy sent in the U.S. Army to escort James Meredith. And James Meredith, Kennedy sent in the U.S. Army to force Mississippi to accept Meredith. And to force Mississippi to integrate or desegregate, or however you want to describe that. Again, it's not like he was completely safe. People could hypothetically shoot him, but then he was walking around with like a 500-person posse. So that was pretty cool. But again, James Meredith. U.S. Army sent in to force University of Mississippi to desegregate and accept or enroll James Meredith. Victory for civil rights? Sure. Is, again, Kennedy doing stuff for the civil rights movement. He's not being like, Meredith, figure it out on your own. No, he says, I will protect you. I'm going to pursue civil rights as president. And then, of course, you have the famous showdown in Birmingham, Alabama. Martin Luther King, this guy right here, just kidding, this guy right here, Martin Luther King decided to try to desegregate Birmingham, Alabama, because Birmingham, Alabama was the most segregated city in the South. The most segregated city in the South. In fact, fun fact, in order to make sure that they didn't have to desegregate, Birmingham, Alabama actually closed down all public facilities so they wouldn't have to desegregate them. Like all the pools, golf courses, parks, they said, nope, we can't use these anymore, they're shut down, just so they wouldn't allow, just so black people couldn't use those. Imagine if I had a bus that had to be desegregated, I'm not going to drive it. That way, I don't have to desegregate it. So that's what they did. They were so adamant about segregation that they were going to close all of their public facilities just so black people couldn't use it, which is not cool. So Martin Luther King begins his march into the South, again, demanding desegregation. and voter registration, or black voter registration. He demands desegregation and black voter registration. Here's a clip.
Protest against segregation in Alabama brought the issue of racial conflict to a head. But in even remedies are not bad. The address itself in the street, in demonstration, parade, and protest, with create tension, and violence. That laws. We face therefore a moral crisis in the country and people. It cannot be met by repressive police action. It cannot be met with increased demonstration in the streets. It cannot be fired by total news or talk. It is in time to act in the Congress, in your state, and the legislative body, and above all, in all of our daily lives. It is not enough to pin the blame on others, to say this is the problem of one section of the country or another. But if there are the facts that we face, there's no change the plan. And our task, our obligation, is to make that revolution, that change, peaceful and constructive for all. Whether we do nothing, everybody shame, and what is violence. Those who are not tolerated are recognizing right. As well as the other. This is one country, but it's become one country because all of us, all the people who came here, had an equal chance to develop their time. 10% of the population. You can't have that right. Your children can't have the chance to develop whatever talents they have. But the only way that they are going to get their right is to go to the street to demonstrate. I think we all them and we all ourselves to better country than ours.
Okay, so the protests begin in Birmingham. Now, are the protests violent? Sorry, are the black protests violent? No, they're designed not to be violent. Again, it's all part of what that Martin Luther King is trying to promote. Peaceful protest, non-violent resistance, civil disobedience. So Martin Luther King is arrested as expected and he goes to jail for 2 weeks. Peacefully, right? That's what he's expecting. He goes to jail. And while he's in jail, when he's arrested, he's in jail for 2 weeks. He writes the very famous letters from Birmingham Jail. So I'm going to read this to you guys, and again, you guys should note the letters from a Birmingham Jail. And at the very end, I want you guys to write down what you think is the key idea behind letters from a Birmingham Jail. Here we go. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntary, given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I have yet to engage in a direct action campaign that was well-timed in the view of those who have not suffered unduly for the disease of segregation. For years now, I have heard the words, "wait." It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurists that justice too long delayed is justice denied. What does that mean? I mean, ultimately, what is the key argument that he's making in this statement? That what shouldn't we do? If we truly want what we want, what shouldn't we do anymore? We shouldn't wait. Because when we wait, what does that mean? No, wait, hold on, just wait. What does that mean? It's never going to happen. Mr. King, can we buy a car? Just hang on, let me finish this lecture. Can I use the bathroom? Yeah, hold on, wait, just wait a second. That's what I do. Can I use the bathroom? Yeah, after this. And then you never ask again. Think about that. You forget. That's the same idea. If we don't do it now, when are we supposed to do it? So he makes a pretty strong argument there. And do the oppressors willingly give people freedoms? No, you have to take it. You have to get it. You have to demand it. You can't just say, can you give us our freedoms back? Yeah, sure. No, that's not going to happen. You have to demand them. In any case, he is released from jail, and MLK decides to include school children in his protests. Not to use them as shields. I want to make that clear. He is not bringing school children to be like, hey, shoot us now that we got kids. The idea was that he wanted to, again, tone down the rhetoric, make it seem like more of a peaceful protest. It was not as threatening. That was the idea. Nonetheless, Bull Connor, the police chief, decided, nope, we're going to go ahead and use fire hoses on them anyway. I should note, these fire hoses are strong enough to tear the bark off a tree. So imagine getting blasted with that. Not fun. And again, trying to get these people to leave. And again, they resisted, but believe me, folks, it hurts. In any case, they also used attack dogs on the children to make sure that they would, disperse. That's some very famous images of attack dogs being used on these, again, peaceful protesters. Eventually, though, after several weeks of protest, Birmingham is eventually desegregated. So, if you were Martin Luther King, would you argue that the protest, the jailing, was it worth it? Yes, because without having to fire a single shot on your part, without you having to beat up one individual person, you were able to desegregate an entire community. So good for you. My hat's off. Well, in response to all of this civil rights-y movements, the KKK and Southern supremacists were pretty upset. So the KKK decided to assassinate Medgar Evers, who is a local director of the NAACP. You guys remember the NAACP? Supposed to promote civil rights, get blacks to college, that kind of thing. Remember that by Webb Du Bois? Well, they assassinate Medgar Evers because he's a local director of the NAACP, saying, "Oh, you want to promote black rights, do you? Well, if you're going to do that, there will be consequences," and they begin to assassinate black leaders, Medgar Evers being one of them. The KKK naturally also get more violent. They bomb Martin Luther King's motel. They bomb his brother's house. They bomb local black churches. In one instance, they bomb a local black church where 4 young black girls are killed right after hearing a sermon about the power of prayer. And then they are killed by the KKK during a bombing in a Baptist Southern or Black Baptist church. So the KKK are getting violent. MLK is not happy about this, so he says, look, we can't, again, just sit back. We have to stand against this. Does that mean let's take up our guns and fight against the KKK? Civil war! Is that what Martin Luther King wants? Take up arms against the KKK? No, he says, no. We will do what we've been doing best. And so Martin Luther King begins the March on Washington movement. On October 28, 1963, 200,000 people marched to Washington, D.C. You heard that correctly. 200,000 people marched to D.C. And he actually followed in the footsteps of who previously organized a march on Washington during World War II if FDR did not desegregate the armed forces and the federal defense industries. What was the name of that guy? He was the father of the civil rights movement. What's his name? Anyone hear what's his name? Oh, A. Philip Randolph. Smart. How'd you remember that? A. Philip Randolph helped organize this because they tried to organize it like 20 years prior. Yeah, during the World War II. Martin Luther King gives this famous "I Have a Dream" speech, compelling speech, powerful speech. And the whole point was to fight for civil rights for blacks. He wants to promote a civil rights bill, and what he wanted was to crush desegregation, outlaw discrimination, and enforce school integration. For the nation, it was his determination, as part of his creation, to fix the nation. And now we have abomination. Abomination. Anyway, the last statement was, and then rap was born. But in any case, I Have a Dream speech, civil rights bill. This will help the civil rights bill pass by 1964, but we'll talk more about that in a second. So he passes again, crush desegregation, outlaw discrimination, enforce school integration. He gives his very famous speech. And an excerpt of that speech is the following. Here he is giving a speech, famously. You can actually go to Washington, D.C. today, and he gives a speech at the Lincoln Memorial, by the way. By the way, why the Lincoln Memorial? Why not the Washington Monument? Why give a speech for blacks, for civil rights at the Lincoln Memorial? Because he freed the slaves, right? There's a reason for everything. By the way, if you go with me on the spring break trip next year, we're going to go to Washington, New York, Philadelphia, and D.C. 4-city, 8-day trip. Should be cool. Anyway, here's a speech. Or part of it, anyway. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places shall be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, my country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside let freedom ring. When we let freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of that old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. It's a pretty good speech. People listen and think, wow, that's pretty good. I'd actually let you watch it, but I want the shorter version of it. But again, pretty good. It's a pretty good speech. So we're like, yeah, we should probably desegregate. But the key argument here is that we're not just getting civil rights for us blacks. We're doing it for you too. Women, no, men, blacks, whites, Asian, Latino, gays, straight, whomever. You all deserve these civil rights too. It's not just for us. We're fighting for everyone. So you have to stop fighting us because we're not doing it just for us. We're doing it for us. So that made sense to a lot of people. Anyway, let's talk about Kennedy and the Cold War. So by the way, is Kennedy doing a pretty good job during the civil rights movement? Yeah. He's letting all this happen. He's like, oh, I like that guy. Anyway, Kennedy and the Cold War begins. And Kennedy will fight during the Cold War. What was Truman's foreign policy? Containment. Pretty good, right? Contain, stop the threats of communism. What was Eisenhower's foreign policy? Roll back, what else? Brinkmanship and massive retaliation. Did massive retaliation work, guys? No, it did not work. Massive retaliation proved to be a major failure. And so Kennedy says, you know what I will do if I am president of the United States? Oh, I am president of the United States. Awesome. He decided flexible response will be my foreign policy. Because, again, did massive retaliation work? It did not. I mean, Kennedy did not like the idea of his two options being either killing everyone or looking like an idiot. Right? Because those were our two options. Either, if you punch me in the face, I either kill your entire family or I don't do anything. Because weren't those my only two options under massive retaliation? That or nothing. And so Kennedy said, I don't think these are two options. If you poke me, should I kill your whole family? No, that's crazy. But then you'll keep poking me. And what am I supposed to do? Not kill your whole family? I don't like those options. So Kennedy says, what about flexible response? What if instead of nuking the entire world and killing everyone, what if we have a variety of options? So flexible response re-emphasized conventional military. Flexible response re-emphasized conventional military over nuclear weapons. What is conventional again? It just means what? Non-nuclear. So conventional military over non-nuclear. So we emphasized or re-emphasized conventional military over nuclear options. And pretty much the whole point was to give us a variety of options. If you poke me, what can I do to you? Poke you back. If you punch me, I punch you back. You nuke me, I nuke you. But now do I have options? I don't just say, poke me, kill everyone. That doesn't work. We failed at that already. So he says, I want to be more flexible. So we do that. One way to do this, the Green Berets are created. You guys know the Green Berets? The Green Berets are special forces. These are the guys that are sent in to do all the dirty work. if they are building a nuclear weapon aimed at America, instead of nuking that country, let's send in the Green Berets to kill their scientists. Then, minimal death. And we prevent. So again, the Green Berets are special forces. They're one of the first special forces. Any other special forces that are created since then? So another famous special force group. Special forces, SEALs, the Army Rangers, these are all special forces as well. Bravo team, these are all special forces. The basic idea is, if these guys are good at land, sea, and air, if they can use a handgun just as well as a sniper rifle, they can interrogate, exfiltrate, infiltrate, are they a better option than nuking your enemy? Like, quick, they've captured the president, nuke them! What? If they have the president, we only have one option. Well, that's stupid. But if we can send the Green Berets, they can save people that are captured. We can do different things. Variety of options. Will that prevent nuclear war? Sure, it'll at least give us some options in the way. So that's helpful. Then the Bay of Pigs happened in 1961. Bay of Pigs is, by the way, a huge failure for America. Very embarrassing. Makes us look kind of stupid. The Bay of Pigs. In 1961, the Americans invaded, or planned, well, yeah, they invaded Cuba. Let me put it this way. In 1961, the Americans failed to invade Cuba. That's a better way to put it. In 1961, the Americans failed to invade Cuba. Here's what happened. The CIA was going to train 1,800 Cuban exiles. Because who were they unhappy with? Fidel Castro. They're like, I don't like Castro because Castro is a nice guy? Oh, communist. We don't like him. So the plan was to send 1,800 Cuban exiles from Florida, sail them all the way around, and land in the Bay of Pigs. And then the goal was to start a revolution. That was the whole point. It fails, though, because on the day of the invasion, Kennedy decides to cancel air support. On the day of the invasion, Kennedy cancels air support. So here are these 1,800 Cuban exiles like, oh, let's take over this government. We're going to do it. We're going to get rid of Castro. They sail up to the shores of the Bay of Pigs, and they're looking at the sky like, oh, can't wait for that air support. They're going to defend us and launch missiles. And they're waiting, and then they're waiting, and then they're waiting, and the air support never arrives. Kennedy cancels the air support. So the helicopters that were supposed to defend them as they landed on the shores never showed up. And the reason why Kennedy canceled the air support was that he knew that the invasion was going to be a failure. The reports that they got were lies by the CIA. The CIA falsely led Kennedy to believe that this would be a success. And when he realized, no, this is shenanigans, it's not going to work out, he cancels the airstrike, or the air support. And what ends up happening is 1,200 Cuban exiles are arrested, and 400 are killed. And this is a major failure for us. Because we tried to invade Cuba, but did that pan out for us? And what's the other problem now? Now they know. Again, 1,200 killed. Sorry, 1,200 captured, 400 killed, 200 were rescued. Is the math work out there? Whatever the remaining is, they were rescued. In any case, what was I saying? Oh, the reason why this is bad. One, it's a huge embarrassment for America. You know what I learned? It has nothing to do with anything. Or tell me if I'm correct on this. Embarrassment in Spanish is not embarazado, right? Because that means you're pregnant. So I heard a story about this girl who went on a date with her boyfriend to meet her family for the first time. And she was really nervous, and they were like, why aren't you talking? He's like, oh, and she wanted to speak Spanish. She's like, yo soy embarazado. They were like, what? You're pregnant? But no, she's like, that's not what that means. The boyfriend was like, what? Fun fact. Anyway, so, yeah. So the Bay of Pigs invasion is a huge failure for America, and the problem is that now the Cubans are concerned about another American invasion. The Cubans are now concerned about American invasions. And so will they prepare for future American invasions? And that's not good. If America invaded you once and they failed, do you think America will try again? Sure. So are you going to do stuff to try to make sure they never invade you again? Sure. So that's a problem. Well, we were pretty unhappy that this failed, so the CIA creates something called Operation Mongoose. And Operation Mongoose, folks, is a CIA-backed plan to overthrow and assassinate Fidel Castro. So Operation Mongoose is a plan to assassinate and overthrow Fidel Castro. And by assassinate and overthrow, I mean in the most comedic, Acme, Looney Tunes kind of ways. I'll just give you a list. You have to write all of these down. For example, the most common was exploding and poisoned cigars. Castro loved cigars. So the CIA was going to poison his cigars or put exploding cigars. Exploding cigars seems the most unlikely, but poisoned cigars seem to be an option. They were also going to do, what were the other ones? They were going to put thallium salts, they were going to put chemicals in his shoes, and the goal was to make his beard fall out. Because like his beard was so iconic, they're like, haha, Castro doesn't have a beard anymore. Now they'll surely overthrow him. That was the logic. The other plan was to fill a TV studio with hallucinogenic drugs, so that if Castro was giving a speech, he'd get really, really high and be on live television and just like get high on TV and, be like, and just do crazy things. Like put LSD in all the water and then have them get high on TV. They were going to go ahead and put exploding seashells at diving sites because Castro really liked diving. So they're like, ooh, pretty shell, and BAM! That didn't happen. They were going to put noxious bacteria and mold in his diving suit so he can inhale the mold and die. They're going to put poisonous bacteria in a scuba tank so he can inhale the bacteria and die. They were going to put deadly bacteria on his handkerchiefs and tea and coffee so he can drink the bacteria and die. These are all options that they attempted. Obviously, none of them panned out. But yeah, we tried to kill Castro several times. We actually ended in 1963 after the Cuban Missile Crisis. We spent 3 years trying to figure out ways to kill Castro, and he didn't die. Because they didn't want him to know it was us. I mean, exploding shells happen, man. Sometimes oysters are just mixing up dynamite and bam, what happened? And just one of those rare exploding oysters. Anyway, that happens. Well, the Bay of Pigs makes us look bad. So like, how can we improve America's image? Well, Peace Corps. The Peace Corps was designed to send young volunteers to developing countries. We were sending young volunteers to developing countries to help with economies, health, and education. Send young volunteers to developing countries to help with economies, health, and what's the deal? Education. So one really good example, you might send some kids to Namibia and they'd be like, what do you need? Oh, we need clean water. People are always getting malaria. You know what you can do? You can filter your water, like boil it. That'll help. Or like, oh, we don't really have very much water in the summers. Oh, I got an idea. You should dig a hole. Everyone should pee in the hole. And then you should put a tarp over it, and then put a can in the middle, and then put the rock in the middle, so that when the pee condensates and steams up, it'll get caught up on the tarp and it'll drip down, and hence fresh water. If you're ever in the desert, guys, do that. If you have no water left, you're in the desert, dig a hole. If you have to pee in the hole. Put a can in the middle, cover it with a tarp, put rocks over it so that the condensation can't escape, put a rock right in the middle so it creates like a dome, inverted pyramid, and then as the water condensates, it'll get caught on the tarp and it'll drip down, and all the salt and the urea and that water that you just peed out will be clean. Yay! Survival technique. Peace Corps. Will this create American goodwill? Yeah. Sure it will. Oh my God, America's so nice. Helping us with our water and our health care and our education. I like America. I'm going to become more democratic as a result. So similar to the other plans. Then is the Alliance for Progress. The Alliance for Progress was a Latin American Marshall Plan. It was the Latin American Marshall Plan, which meant we were going to give them money to do what? Or what did the Marshall Plan do? Was it military aid? Economic aid. So we gave them $20 billion to improve their economies to prevent what? Communism. So $20 billion to prevent the spread of communism in Latin America. So it's the Latin American Marshall Plan. Cool stuff. Good times. Good so far? Ultimately, though, it's considered that the Marshall, or rather the Alliance for Progress, was a failure. Here are two cartoons dictating that. On the left side, what is suggested by the cartoon? It's a very slow. Alliance for Progress is not making very much progress anymore. And on the right side, Alliance for Progress is sinking. So again, by the way, who's in the snail? In the snail? It's a Latin American. Yeah. Anyway. Berlin Wall. Berlin Wall. I was waiting for someone to say Mexican. I wasn't call you guys out again. Racist. Anyway. Berlin Wall. So, you guys remember the Berlin city divided? East was Soviet, West was American, capitalist, whatever. Well, fun times. In 1961, the Soviets decide to build a wall around Berlin. Why do the Soviets decide to build a wall around Berlin? What are they concerned about happening all the freaking time? What is happening? Why do the Soviets want to build a wall around West Berlin? America keeps invading? No, it's not that. Ryan. The people from where? Are? Oh, but West Berliners are allowed to move to West Germany because that's West Germany. The concern is that East Germans are moving or running away to West Berlin so they can get where? To West Germany. You guys remember that? Because West Berlin is part of West Germany. And the Soviets have already lost like 3.5 million people to this. So like, okay, we can't have that keep on happening, because does that make them look bad? That everyone's running away. So they built the Berlin Wall to divide Berlin, or to separate Berlin from the west of East Germany. Again, pretty much the major reason is to prevent people from escaping. I mean, that year alone, 100,000 people escaped. So the goal is to prevent East Germans from escaping into West Berlin. So they built this giant wall. And there's the wall right there. So here's West Germany. There's the other way around. Here's East Germany. Here's West Germany. And then there's this giant wall in the way. And you can't get to it. So they separate them. Well, here's a young woman and her boyfriend talking to her mom on the East German side. Or East Berlin side, because they can no longer see each other because the city has been divided by that massive wall. 2.7 million attempt to escape into West Berlin still, and over 400 to 800, depending on who you talk to, are killed by guards or by drowning trying to escape into West Berlin. So again, pretty bad nonetheless of people trying to get into West Berlin. It's pretty hard though, because the entire gate or entire wall is being guarded by East Germans with guns trying to prevent people from crossing into West Berlin. So Kennedy goes ahead and gives the famous Ich bin ein Berliner speech, or pretty much Kennedy supports the West Berliners. He promises again not to abandon them, which is something that every president has said thus far. We will not abandon Berlin. And yeah, the Berlin Wall becomes the symbol of the Cold War, guys. The Berlin Wall will become a symbol of the Cold War. Because, I mean, it's literally Soviets and Americans, literally, what, 10 feet apart from each other? It's a pretty big deal. Yep. But Kennedy says, I will not abandon West Berlin, and you should tear down this wall. But Soviets were like, no, we're not going to do that. Cool. Awesome. So then things get real. Real. In October 1962, you guys have the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is the closest that the world will ever get to nuclear annihilation. We were this close to all dying, folks. You can't see, but my fingers aren't touching, but that's how close we were. Very, very close. Several people had their fingers hovering over the buttons, getting ready to fire those bombs, ready to turn those keys to fire the missiles. Missiles around the world were on a 15-minute ready-to-go fire. We were ready to kill each other. Here's why. In 1962, the Soviets began placing nuclear missiles in Cuba. In 1962, the Soviets began placing nuclear missiles in Cuba. Why might Cuba want the Soviets to place nuclear missiles there? What reason do they have to want nuclear missiles? True, so they have less time to respond, but why might the Cubans, why might they want to have nuclear missiles? Cordell?
They fear another invasion.
Huh?
They fear another
invasion. So like, yeah, definitely, give us missiles. Will that prevent another American invasion? Sure. So that's why they do it. So yeah, give us missiles, that'll prevent another American invasion. Well, we suspected for the last 4 months or so that the Cubans were actually receiving nuclear materials from the Soviets. So we began investigating, and some planes were flying over taking these pictures. Like, wait, are those look like missile transports. Those look like nuclear missile transports for Soviet technology, ICBMs and whatever else. So we said, well, we got to get a closer look. And so on October 14th, we sent a U-2 spy plane to take some aerial photographs. The CIA takes a look at the photos and they realize, okay, those are actual nuclear missile equipment. Okay, so CIA sends in a U-2 spy plane to investigate further. What are these things really? After some investigation, getting the photos back, like, yep, that's nuclear missiles. We have 5 options. You don't have to write down all the 5 options, but we say, okay, what do? The Cubans are developing nuclear missiles from Russia. Well, 1, we can do nothing. 2, we can negotiate. We can have diplomacy. 3, we can warn them that we know. 4, we can blockade them. Or 5, we can invade them. We can kill them all. So multiple options here. The generals demanded a full invasion of Cuba. The generals demanded a full invasion of Cuba. Well, why is that a concern for Kennedy? If we invade Cuba, what is eventually going to happen? The Soviets will what? Yeah, they will declare war on us, and as that war escalates, what will eventually happen? A nuclear war will begin. So we might not use nukes right away, but will we eventually use nuclear weapons? So any direct conflict, folks, will result in war. So Kennedy's like, no, we can't go to war. But General's like, Kennedy, you're weak. They are developing nuclear missiles as we speak. Those nuclear missiles might be ready at any time. You're telling me you don't want to eliminate those right now? So you don't know where they are. Kennedy said, you guys have to calm the hell down. We don't know if they're ready yet. We have to find out more. So Kennedy gets on the phone with one of the U-2 spy planes and says, look, rather, not him. Kennedy tells Robert McNamara, he says, I need you to talk to the U-2 spy planes and take some closer photos. So he asks one of the spy pilots, General Hazer. He tells one of the pilots, I need you to fly over Cuba. I need to get some low aerial shots. We need to know what we're working with. But I want to make something clear, soldier. You will not get shot at. He's like, what are you talking about? They're definitely going to shoot at me. No, you don't understand. You will not get shot at. What are you talking about? I have a room full of generals looking for an excuse to invade. If you fly over Cuba and you return with a bullet hole in your plane, there's no stopping them from declaring war. There's nothing that I can do. So you will not get shot at. If you get shot, you do not call Mayday. You do not declare SOS. You do not return that plane. You crash that plane into a mountain. You say mechanical failure. You say anything. But you were not shot at. The pilot's like, crap. All right. So the pilot flies over. He takes some low aerial shots. By the way, this is the captain. Captain Hazer. Or Heiser. Forget how you pronounce it. Captain Heiser. He flies over. He takes some good aerial shots, and we get some photos like this. Oh, yep, those are missiles. Figured it out. And on October 22nd, sorry, that was October 14th. On October 22nd, Kennedy informs the American public, because up until this point, the American people had no idea that the Cubans had nuclear missiles. On October 22nd, Kennedy declares, or informs the American public that Cuba had nuclear missiles. And he also declares, after looking at all these photos, that we were going to institute a quarantine or a blockade of Cuba. Are the American people scared? Oh, most definitely. You're telling me Cuba has nuclear missiles? Here's the problem, folks. If Russia was going to launch a nuclear attack on us back then, how long would that take? Roughly how long would it take for a nuclear missile to hit us? 30 minutes. About 30 minutes. If Cuba has nuclear missiles that are operational, how long would it take them to hit us? 2 minutes. Is that enough time to respond? 2 minutes, guys. Here's the clock. They leave the silos. Within 30 seconds, we're able to detect it. In those 30 seconds, you run to the president and let him know that we've detected nuclear missiles. In those 30 seconds, the president has to inform SAC and a command that, we have to launch our nuclear missiles, and it takes another minute to actually launch our missiles. That's 2.5 minutes already. 30 seconds in our launch preparations, those missiles were already struck Washington, D.C., they were struck New York, Atlanta. 2 minutes is not enough response time. So that was a concern for a lot of people. So we established a blockade or a quarantine around Cuba. And we say 2 things. Number 1, the Soviets must remove the nuclear missiles. And 2, no further missiles will be allowed in Cuba. So we must remove the missiles, and no further missiles will be allowed in Cuba. So there's the blockade. So again, 1, the Soviets must remove their missiles, and dos, no further missiles will be allowed in Cuba. We will establish a blockade around Cuba. The international community gets involved here. They're like, yeah, no further missiles. Venezuela, Colombia, a whole bunch of other countries send ships to provide the blockade around Cuba. And this is a problem, because the entire world is watching now, and the entire world is nervous. Because this is a standoff between America and the U.S. And if America and the U.S. start shooting at each other, will the whole world be destroyed? Most definitely. So America sets up a blockade saying, you may not pass, Soviet Union. Soviet says, you can't tell us what to do. That blockade is an act of war. So Soviet says, we're going to run the blockade. Now, the whole world is watching. Here comes the problem. If the Americans allow the Soviets to pass the blockade, how will the Americans look? If the Americans allow the Soviets to pass their blockade, how will that make the Americans look? Weak. And if the Soviets stop at the blockade, how will that make the Soviets look? Weak. And the whole world is watching, and everyone is refusing to blink. So here's the blockade. A ship is charging towards the blockade. The captain on one of the ships calls President Kennedy, there's a Russian ship on its way and it's not slowing down. What should we do? Fire? Okay, he says, do not fire. If you fire, this will escalate into a nuclear war. We'll all be dead. So what do you expect to do? Stop that ship. How? I don't know, but you got to stop it, but you cannot fire. Like, what are we supposed to do? The Russian ship calls Khrushchev. President Khrushchev, there's an American ship on our way. What are you supposed to do? Ram it? Shoot them? Khrushchev says, don't shoot them. Do not ram them, but cross that blockade. What? Now this is a problem. The entire world is watching. That ship is getting closer, and the entire world is on the edge of their seat, and they hold a collective breath. Everyone's like, holy crap. Because no one knows what's going to happen. We all genuinely feel that this is it. One of them is going to open fire. We're all going to be dead. 3 minutes later, nuclear missile will be flying across the world, and we'll just watch as those nuclear missiles cross each other, and we'll all die 10 minutes later. This is our concern. Kennedy says, well, fire across their bow. Tell them that we mean business, but don't shoot them. Fires across their bow. It doesn't stop. We're like, oh my God, we're all going to die. Everyone is watching, and no one knows what to do. Eventually, the ship stops just right outside that blockade, and they just sit there. And no one knows what is going to happen here. Because this ship has nuclear missiles. We've let other ships pass that had just food, necessity, whatever. But this ship had nuclear missiles. If that ship turns around, the Soviets lose. If that ship passes through, America loses. And folks, this is the penultimate of brinkmanship, isn't it? No one is refusing to back down. And the whole world is literally a minute away from nuclear destruction. Kennedy and Khrushchev are on the phone trying to figure out what are we supposed to do here. I can't just let your ship pass. Well, I can't just stand here and wait. We got to figure this out. Well, they do, luckily, because we're all still here. Eventually, on October 26th, that ship starts turning around. Everyone's like, oh my God. And the whole world breathes a huge sigh of relief because the world is not destroyed anymore. Here's what they came up with to prevent the world from destruction. Number one, a nuclear test ban treaty. You know what we learned? That nuclear weapons are dangerous. They'll kill everyone. You guys know I study nuclear weapons all the time. They're dangerous. They are not good for us. They will kill us all. So they decide to sign a nuclear test ban treaty saying, we should probably stop making our nuclear weapons stronger because the ones that we already have will kill us. So 100 megaton bomb is not necessary. Then the Soviets agree to remove missiles from Cuba. Now, America has to give something as well. The Americans will remove their missiles from Turkey. So an exchange, a swap of sorts, if you will. And we developed the hotline. The basic idea behind the hotline, Kennedy and Khrushchev, or the president and the president of both countries, they can speak to each other directly now. Instead of being like, quick, I gotta get to Brittany. Cordell, let Brittany know. Cordell tells Ryan, Ryan tells Jasmine, Jasmine tells Carissa, Carissa tells Antonia, Antonia tells Christine, Christine tells Vanessa, Vanessa tells Brittany. Is that effective? That's what we were doing during the Cold War. Like, tell Khrushchev this. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Kennedy says he wants to buy you socks. What? That makes no sense. Poor translation. But again, problem. And so we make sure that we have a direct hotline. And we use this several times, guys. You guys don't know this, but there are, I think, at least 6 instances in which the world almost was plunged into nuclear war by accident. And if it wasn't for this phone, we all would be dead already. Yay. That close, guys. We're all a minute away from being killed. North Korea has nuclear weapons. What did we learn? Nuclear weapons are bad. And Kennedy and Khrushchev were like, we cannot let this monster out of the box. You guys get the imagery? Nuclear weapons are dangerous. Unfortunately, by 1963, that November, or the following November, Kennedy is killed by Lee Harvey Oswald. While he is on a, what do you call those? A parade route in Dallas. He's shot through the head, the neck. He's killed by the suspected lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald. He dies instantly, but he's reported dead at the hospital. And Lyndon B. Johnson is sworn in as president on Air Force One 90 minutes later. But Kennedy is killed on November 22nd, 1963. People wonder, again, just like Lincoln, if Kennedy had survived, would he go down as that president that was like very great and courageous and whatever else? And I think, just like Lincoln, I think our assessment would be that he probably would not be as popular as he was had he not been killed. I mean, yes, he made sure that we don't get plunged into war, but his domestic policies were not very effective. So again, historians have to determine if he was really as great as people suggest. But anyway, November 22nd, 1963, Kennedy is assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald. The Warren Commission investigates the assassination and rules that it was not a conspiracy, that Lee Harvey Oswald was the only assassin. Other people argue that maybe it was a conspiracy, that the CIA was involved because they're angry about Bay of Pigs, or the Soviets did it, or the Cubans did it, or the military did it, or Mafia did it. Some people believe the Mafia killed him. It just depends. Depends on who you talk to. But yeah. There was a fear that this might be a Soviet attack also. So like, oh my God, are the Soviets beginning to kill us? So that was also a fear. But anyway, Kennedy dies, and LBJ becomes the next Presidente of the United States. The 36th Presidente del Estados Unidos. Serving from 63 to 68. So question, how many terms did he run for president? 1 term. How many terms was he allowed to run for? 2 terms. Why would he be allowed to run for 2 terms as president? That's right, because he only served 1 year of Kennedy's term. What's the maximum years you can be president, guys? 10, but he would technically have only served 9 had he won re-election in 68. So, fun fact, guys, you remember that. So Johnson's presidency and his domestics. I think we're going to be done a week early, guys. Like, for real. As I was going through the schedule today, I'm like, wow, we're really far ahead. Remember I told you we were behind? Then I realized in years past I've only done this lecture in like a day, but because like I have 3 weeks, I'm like, oh, we'll extend it a little bit more. But still, no, we will be done. Maybe not next week, but the week before. Remember I told you we'd have 1 more week after spring break? No, we'll be done before spring break, which is crazy. Aren't you guys excited? Like this close, guys. Johnson wins re-election in 1964. Yay for Johnson. So Johnson wins in 64, he wins re-election. And Johnson's foreign policy, or domestic policy, is called Great Society. This is an actual comic book during the Great Society, trying to let kids know that LBJ is pretty cool. Now, the Great Society, folks, here pointing to America, which makes it look like it has a French flag. I don't understand why they did that. But in any case, the Great Society under LBJ was to promote New Deal type programs. New Deal type programs. So pretty much they were going to promote economic and welfare programs for the needy. The Great Society was designed to promote economic and welfare programs for the needy. Economic and welfare programs for the needy, very much like the New Deal. The reason why Johnson did this is that he was inspired by many Americans by the book by Michael Harrington, The Other America. And in The Other America by Michael Harrington, he wrote that 20% of all Americans and 40% of blacks in particular were in poverty. So in Michael Harrington's The Other America, he wrote that 20% of all Americans, and in particular 40% of blacks, were in poverty. That's a lot, especially for the black population. I mean, if you're double, that's not good. That means we're not doing enough. So what does Johnson want to do? Let these people be poor? He wants to help these people through the Great Society. And so he creates a Great Society. You don't have to write all this down, but just kind of take a look at it real quick. Get an idea of the Great Society here. Just kind of look at what stuff he did, and we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail. But kind of just take a look at this graph real quick. This is one really good way to do essays, folks. You kind of take a look at this, and you'd be like, oh, this is paragraph 1, paragraph 2, and paragraph 3. And what are all those things coming out of those paragraphs then? Facts. So these are all facts. But again, if you guys are going to write your essay for Friday, for example, and you guys are going to outline, you should probably do it like this. Or one way to do it. In any case, here's what he did. Education. He did a few things. For education, he created the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or EC. Pretty much he gave, what's the number? 4 billion? 4 billion? 4 billion? 1 billion. He gave $1 billion to education, to pay for things like, I don't know, pencils, textbooks, protractors, things that are necessary for the educational experience. Then he created Head Start. How many guys were ever in Head Start? Have you ever heard Head Start before? Head Start? Okay. So Head Start was designed, again, to help minorities, disadvantaged communities, whatever else, from having school preparation. It was designed to prepare kids for school, like elementary and pre-K. And then there was Upward Bound. Anyone here remember of Upward Bound? Any Upward Bound kids in here? Yeah, Upward Bound, also created by Johnson. You guys are in a Great Society program. Isn't that cool? History. You should talk to your, go talk to your directors or your coordinators for Upward Bound. Like, hey, which president created this program? Since you're the coordinator and all, you should know. Ask them, quiz them. And be like, well, my teacher said. Use that tone also. My teacher. The Upward Bound, of course, is designed to help high school kids go to college. So, again, a pretty neat program as well. In terms of health, we create Medicare. Medicare is supposed to help or provide health insurance for who? Who doesn't have health insurance? The poor and elderly. So Medicare is supposed to provide health insurance for the poor and elderly. So that's helpful. My grandma had Medicare. And then War on Poverty, folks. We create the HUD, which still exists today. And the HUD is, again, supposed to provide low-income housing for the poor. That kind of thing. Good so far? I bet it is. So is Johnson doing a lot for the American people? Sure. Is he more successful than Kennedy in his domestic policies? Yeah, he is. Let's see. Did poverty go down under Johnson's administration? Sure did. Did more kids go to college? Sure did. Did we spend more money on Social Security and welfare programs? Sure did. Did more African Americans attain high educational attainment? Sure did. Impressive. So, great society, successful so far. Then there's Immigration Act of 1965. We're going to undo what previous immigration system? How did we immigrate to America before in 1920s? The what? Quota system. Very good. So in the 1920s, the National Origins Act of 1924 and the Emergency Quota Act of 1921. Remember, we had a quota act. So this will undo the quota system. And instead of the quota system, what this is going to do is it will replace it with a first-come, first-served basis. It will replace the quota system with first-come, first-served. So we'll replace the quota system with first-come, first-served. Now, this does give preference to highly educated and highly skilled. This gave preference to highly educated and highly skilled and immigrants with families in America. And immigrants with families in America. So let's say let's say your parents were already American citizens and you lived in Mexico and you want to immigrate to America. You would have a shorter line to wait than someone who is just trying to come here for the first time. But by the way, does anyone know what the wait list is now for anyone that wants to immigrate to America without any of these special conditions like being a nurse or a doctor? Do you know what the wait time is now? Yeah. Huh? 10 years or more. In fact, it's 18 years, guys. So if you want to come to America and you're not in a special line because you're not a relative or you're not a doctor, lawyer, nurse, teacher, whatever, you're not a special need, then they're actually currently processing applications from 1995. At this moment, if you applied in 95, you are just getting your application processed. So the wait to come to America, folks, is still very long. Yeah. If you're a relative, and also if you are highly educated or highly skilled. So again, for many of you, you may be familiar with the term brain drain. So nurses from the Philippines, doctors from the Philippines, engineers from India, China are all coming to America because it's easier for them to get here, unlike college visas, work visas, than people that are obviously not skilled. And so this creates a whole set of global problems, but it actually allows more people to immigrate into America. It actually doubles immigration in America in 1965. But that's a change. And then he also deals with civil rights, this Kennedy guy. Not Kennedy, who are we talking about? Oh, Johnson. Johnson does this. One of the things that Johnson does as president is he goes ahead and he passes, or he has Congress pass the 24th Amendment. And the 24th Amendment will eliminate what? Oh, come on, guys. No, use the clues. Poll taxes. What's a poll tax? You got to pay to vote. And typically poll taxes were used to do what? To stop blacks from voting. And so again, the idea was that they were going to abolish or eliminate the poll tax. I really like this cartoon, by the way, because what are they doing with the poll tax? I mean, look at here. Here's slavery. Here's prohibition. Here's no votes for women. This guy has a sign that says poll tax. And they're in what is called the museum. So what is this cartoon suggesting? Oh, come on, guys. Huh? Sure, but what is implied? I mean, what are they saying about the poll tax? It's going to be, kicked back into history now, right? It's no longer going to be something we thought, we got rid of slavery, and we got rid of prohibition, and we got rid of, no voting for women. Now we'll get rid of the poll tax, too. It's in a museum where we look back, like, oh, remember in the times when we said women couldn't vote? That's as crazy as poll tax now. But I like that cartoon. It's neat. We also passed the Civil Rights Bill. Remember the one that Martin Luther King was fighting for? He did it. Hooray. One of the things that the Civil Rights Bill did is in 1964, it created the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC. And the EEOC prevented job discrimination. This is something that applies to you guys today. If you're not getting hired because you believe it's because of your race or gender, that's not allowed, guys. So, age is okay. But race, gender, creed, whatever, you can't hire them. They can't not hire you because like you're black or Latino. Now, could they make something up? Sure. But they can't be like, I'm not going to hire you, you're black. They can't do that anymore. Now they have to lie, which is what they'll do now. Anyway, there's that. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The other thing that it does is that it requires or it forbids segregation in hotels, motels, Holiday Inns. Anyone? But hotels, motels, lunch counters, theater. It forbids segregation in hotels, motels, Holiday Inns. It forbids segregation in hotels, motels, sporting arenas, theaters, lunch counters, that kind of thing. The basic idea is any business in interstate commerce was no longer allowed to segregate. It forbids segregation in hotels, motels, or any business in interstate commerce. So if you have customers from out of state, are you allowed to segregate? No, but if you're like Doubles, is Doubles allowed to segregate? Sure, because they're not going to get like people from Arizona to come to Doubles and oh, we should try the Works Burger. No, it's ridiculous. Anyway, Civil Rights Bill. Good for Civil Rights Movement. Sure. Then there's the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Currently being reviewed by the Supreme Court to see if this should still apply. So we'll let you guys know if this changes anytime soon. But the basic idea behind the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was one. No more literacy tests. Yay. No more literacy tests. And two, the federal government would prevent black voter suppression. The federal government would prevent black voter suppression. The federal government would prevent black voter suppression. And ban literacy tests, and the federal government would ban black voter suppression. Cool. This was successful, folks. Over 3 years, 750,000 blacks registered to vote. That's pretty good. So over 740,000 registered to vote in just 3 years. It's very successful, and as a result, will blacks be influential in politics? Yes, because now they can vote, and now we have to cater to their vote. So that's that, the Voting Rights Act. Affirmative action also becomes an issue back then. The basic idea behind affirmative action. Colleges and employers would give colleges and employers would hire minorities and women. Colleges and employers were required to hire minorities and women. Because up until this point, the majority of people in college were what? What kind of men?
White men.
White men. And majority of the best jobs were white men. And so they said, you know, that's probably because of historical and institutional racism. So the whole point of affirmative action was to fight historical and institutional racism. One of the many cartoons that goes with that, I survived life on welfare and food stamps in a poor, crime-ridden neighborhood with schools crumbling, filled with guns and drugs, in a world that rewards rich white men. So now affirmative action will help me get into college, and that kid's like, that's so unfair! Why do you get special treatment? And the argument is that all of this stuff here, that only happened to her because, you know, blacks were enslaved for like 400 years, or women weren't given the right to vote for like 200 years. So ideally, if those historical things did not happen, would they be on an equal par with white men? That's the argument. So affirmative action is designed to kind of fix that. Affirmative action, by the way, is back in the news. They're going to see if we keep affirmative action. But again, here's the idea. The white guy's also on top. Affirmative action is going to help these minorities climb up, but they're standing on a box that's helping them climb. Like, hey, no cheating! Yes.
Historical what?
Historical and institutional racism. historical and institutional. What I mean by institutional racism, guys, is something like, well, we've always hired white men for this job. You know? So, different. Eventually, we appoint Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson becomes a famous affirmative action attorney. Or he becomes a famous civil rights leader, Jesse Jackson, who looks a lot like Will Smith from Pursuit of Happiness. Just in that one movie. I'm not saying they look the same. I'm saying in that movie, Will Smith did a really good job looking like Jesse Jackson. And they also nominate Thurgood Marshall and appoint him to be the first what? Black Supreme Court Justice. Pretty impressive, guys. Thurgood Marshall becomes the first black Supreme Court Justice. Jesse Jackson becomes a famous civil rights or affirmative action attorney. Cool. Jesse Jackson, civil rights or affirmative action attorney. Thurgood Marshall, first black Supreme Court Justice. Man. Then you have the rise of the Black Power movement. Remember how Martin Luther King was all about non-violent resistance and love thy neighbor and let's all be all friends? Well, the Black Power movement was like, no, we're not going to have any of that. That's ridiculous. That's too slow. And so in the 1960s, you have a lot of people that don't agree with nonviolent resistance. Those people included the black separatists, like the Nation of Islam. This was a group of black Islamic people that were pretty militant, pretty angry. And they opposed integration. What did they not want to do? These blacks opposed integration, which means what? They want to stay segregated, but not because they thought they were inferior. They wanted to stay segregated because they didn't like whites. They said, we're better than them. We don't need to integrate. What's the point? There's no need. We can be successful on our own. So they opposed integration. Many of them believed in that Back to Africa movement. You guys remember the Back to Africa movement? Who was the Back to Africa leader in the 1920s? What's his name? United Negro Improvement Association. Marcus Garvey. Well done. So again, they are, opposed integration. Malcolm X becomes one of their major leaders. Malcolm X becomes the spokesperson of the Nation of Islam. He's like, yes, we should fight back, or we should use violence if necessary. So Malcolm X actually promoted the use of violence for a time, saying we should fight back against whites if we have to. We should use violence if necessary to promote black rights. So is that different from Martin Luther King? Yes, he said, you know, Martin Luther King is crazy, it's too slow. So he promoted violence if necessary. Eventually, Malcolm X goes to Mecca. He does his pilgrimage, his Islamic pilgrimage, and he comes back super peaceful. Like, man, I was wrong about that whole violence thing. He was. I mean, he came back, and he's assassinated for it. The Nation of Islam is so angry about his change of heart that they kill him for it. Like, you are not promoting the message that we wanted, so we're going to kill you. So they kill him as a result. But before Malcolm X comes back, he does agree with Dr. They start meeting again. And he gives this really awesome statement that says, the white people should thank Dr. King for holding black people in check. Because in reality, folks, we're black people angry. And if Martin Luther King wasn't there saying, hey, we should all be calm, is it likely that we would have already had a race war? Black people would have been angry and they would have probably fought back against whites. But Martin Luther King said, calm, my friends, calm. Let's do this non-violently. So he says, we should thank Dr. Martin Luther King for not being so violent. On the other side, you have SNCC and Stokely Carmichael. Remember SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee? Well, they were still being nonviolent for a time, but they began to promote black power. And the basic idea was that they rejected interracial cooperation. They rejected interracial... Whoops. Yeah, they were the ones that did the sit-ins. But now they're changing under Stokely Carmichael, and they're rejecting interracial cooperation. Pretty much, what don't they like about this button? Yeah, the white hand, that's ridiculous. We can take care of ourselves. That should be a black hand. But that's what they said. We don't need white people's help. We can take care of it ourselves. We don't need them. And so the interesting thing about the Black Power movement under Stokely Carmichael and SNCC was that the new movement was about black nationalism. It was black nationalism instead of integration. The new goal became black nationalism. Blacks are awesome. And we don't need to integrate. Who can help blacks?
Myself.
Ourselves. We don't need your help. We don't need you or you or you. We can help ourselves. Quick, change the buttons. But that was the idea. We can help ourselves. We don't need them to help us. So you have that going on. And then the other group, the other black power movement, are the Black Panthers, led by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. These guys were militants. These guys actually believed that a race war was going to happen in the future, and they were arming themselves for an eventual race war. They were buying machine guns, they were buying grenades, and the Black Panthers were militants who were preparing for a race war between an inevitable race war between whites and blacks. If you guys ever watched the movie Forrest Gump, there's that very famous scene where they're with their machine guns and their grenades and their bullets, like, we're going to fight people one day, and they will listen to us because we have guns. I'm like, yeah, cool. But yeah, are these very different approaches to civil rights than what Martin Luther King was suggesting? Sure, but again, like I said, were there different approaches to civil rights? It wasn't just, let's all just wait. These guys were like, no, nonviolent resistance is way too slow. No, we should take our civil rights instead of just do it nonviolently. So they were willing to fight, kill, do whatever they needed to do in the eventual race war. Cool. Eventually you have what are known as the long hot summers in 1965, 1966, and 1967, these long hot summers. These were a series of race riots throughout the country, particularly in Detroit and Watts. You guys know where Watts is? Watts is in LA, suburb of Los Angeles. But there were race riots in 65, 66, and 67 in the cities of Detroit, Watts, and all across the country, causing over $40 million in damage. That's 3 years of repeated race wars and race riots during the summers in Detroit, Watts, and other urban communities. So do we want to figure out what's causing this? It's kind of a problem. $40 billion this costs us. So the Kerner Commission is established to investigate what is causing all of this frustration and anger. And they conclude that, wait for it, the riots were caused by racism. You're like, oh, what? I could not have called that. But really it comes down to also racial inequality. I mean, that's the better answer. But they concluded that racial inequality was causing these race riots. I mean, I would have been more shocked. It was like apparently donuts were running out throughout the country. And as a result, people were just persnickety. That would have been a much more interesting story. But no, this is pretty obvious. And so we try to make sure that we end racial inequality as one of the recommendations. Everyone cool with that? Martin Luther King is eventually assassinated by James Earl Ray. Unfortunately, in Memphis, Tennessee. Which is pretty sad. James Earl Ray assassinates Martin Luther King. How do you think the blacks responded to this? Bad. There were riots. I mean, a lot of riots, and people were angry. And Robert F. Kennedy, who was a candidate for the presidency at the time, says, guys, this is not what Martin Luther King would have wanted. So he calms them down. But again, it was bad. They're like, the only person that was holding all, blacks back was killed. And they were like, oh, you killed our leader. You killed our father. And so it could have gotten bad, folks, but luckily we calmed their nerves.
What did they do to James Earl Ray?
They arrested him, went to jail. He confessed to it, and then he said, nope, I didn't do it. He escaped from jail twice. They said it was a conspiracy, a whole bunch of things. He eventually dies in prison of hepatitis C. Last slide, folks, today, women's rights. A lot of things happened in the 1960s with regard to women's rights. Of course, you guys already know the book Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. What did Betty Friedan say? Yeah, that the cult of domesticity was boring, right? That women should
Go out and work.
Yes, they should go out and work, that they don't have to be housewives. Now, again, could they be housewives? they could, but Betty Friedan said, no, housework is boring. Women should go out and work and be equal. So she made that argument. Interestingly, folks, I was watching TV last night with my fiance, and we were watching a Swiffer commercial, I think, and my fiance pointed out that the lady in the Swiffer commercial was wearing high-heeled shoes as she was swiffing. And we're like, cult of domesticity is making its way around again. You know, you don't really see a lot of people wearing high-heeled shoes while cleaning the floors in commercials anymore, but we saw them like, I guess it's making a comeback. Because only like women are allowed to be comfortable. That one was just like, no, you still gotta get dressed up, put on the pearl earrings, put on the dress, and then make sure you clean the house. So that's making a comeback. Well, in any case, Betty Friedan joins a bunch of other progressive women, and they create the organization called the National Organization of Women, known as NOW. Now again, do you think they came up with National Organization of Women first and be like, hey, did you know that spells now? Or do you think they came up with an acronym? And then they're like, well, I like the word now. What can we do with now? What words have the W in it? Water. Can we do water? Women are trying for equal rights. See, that would work too. Anyway, National Organization for Women. They are fighting for equal rights, folks. They're fighting for equal pay, equal employment. They're fighting for equal pay, equal employment. They wanted to legalize abortion, which is not legalized yet at this time. And they tried to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. Now tried to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. Because their complaint was that when the 14th Amendment was passed, folks, it said that all people would have equal rights, or would be guaranteed equal rights and not be denied based on race, creed, or condition of servitude. But it did not include what? Gender or sex. So they said we must include sex in the Constitution. Not sex in the Constitution. We must include, women in the Constitution, civil rights. And so they fought for Equal Rights Amendment, the basic idea being that women should have the same protections. Well, the Equal Rights Amendment passed several states, but was eventually defeated by this woman, Phyllis Schlafly. That's right, a woman campaigned against equal rights for women. Now, you might be wondering, why? Well, there's a few reasons why she opposed it. Number one, she was a conservative. She said if women get equal rights, this might make women more progressive, women will go out and work more, and not be what? Housewives. She didn't like the idea of ruining the cult of domesticity. She also said that we did not need the Equal Rights Amendment because women were already equal in the Constitution. Like, oh no, it's already implied that women have equal rights. We don't need a specific one. So she said that it was unnecessary, that women were already equal. And yet when you look at the numbers today even, do women get paid the same as men?
No.
Do women get the same access to jobs as men? No. So maybe she was wrong on that one. The other thing, though, she said that women would lose benefits if this was passed. Benefits like benefits that women get if they divorce their husbands, if you divorce your husband, you usually get no alimony payments, whatever else. You would lose those, and you would have to join the military because you would lose those benefits as well. So the basic idea, she said, that women would lose if we gave them equal rights, which I would argue is a pretty good reason not to give women equal rights. What's next? We give equal rights to cows? Ha ha ha! It's that again. Same argument. Another key issue then is Title IX. How many of you people, or rather how many of you women, play an after-school sport or are in an after-school program? Anyone at all here in an after-school sport, after-school program? Well, you can thank Title IX for that. Title IX, folks, what happened here was that it guaranteed girls equal access to after-school programs. What did I just say? I just drew a blank. It guaranteed girls equal access to after-school programs. I'm trying to figure out how I said it last period. And I said it in a way that was inappropriate. I think I said something like, it guaranteed equal access to girls after school. I said, no, that's not right. There's something very wrong with that statement. It guaranteed girls equal access to after-school programs. But I said the other one, they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, what did I just say? No, don't write that down. I'm going to jail. No, it guaranteed girls equal access to after-school programs, so that's pretty significant. Because back then, folks, if you were a school, would you want to spend your money on programs for girls? No, all the money went to like boys basketball teams, boys football teams, that kind of thing. But they decided that no, if girls are going to be equal to men, they deserve equal access to sports. There's a direct correlation, by the way, with Title IX and the 1999 women's U.S. soccer team winning the World Cup. That those were the first women that benefited from Title IX, and that's why they went on to win the World Cup, because they adopted all of the programs that gave women access to soccer programs after school, that kind of thing. So they're kind of like Mia Hamm and all those people are kind of the poster child for Title IX. In any case, other key things, Sally Ride. No, not yet. Professional sports are not public school. I mean, it still applies to colleges, but not professional. So the colleges had to get Title IX. In order for colleges to get Title IX funding, they had to have a specific amount of girls' teams, which is why at the Claremont colleges, CMC and Scripps and are combined, because otherwise Scripps would not receive Title IX funding. They had to actually merge and show there was a parity between those groups. In any case, Sally Ride, she becomes the first female astronaut. That's pretty sweet. And then Geraldine Ferraro becomes the first person to drive a Ferrari. No, that's not right. Geraldine Ferraro becomes the first vice presidential female candidate. The first female vice presidential candidate. And we'll stop there today. How did you guys finish early? Did we go fast? You could have asked me to slow down. All right. On Friday, you guys have an essay. Truman Eisenhower. I won't tell you which, but you guys must study. If you guys did not get the chart, you must pick it up in the back. That is due first thing when you walk in, folks. If you don't do it, you won't get the credit for it, and you will likely be unprepared. If you need access to the AMSCO book and you forgot the password, it's on the Mr. King LPHS Facebook page. Username is LPHS, and the password is Go Warriors. If you want to buy Power 106 basketball tickets, you can buy them from Christine or Diana. If they've run out already, you can buy them from me. Have a wonderful day, folks. I'll see you all later.
Which Diana?
Pada what? What's this for? Oh, cool. That is fun. Is it the one at Workman?
Yeah.
What part do you sing?
Not bad.